Okay, I've turned the streaming on also.
It looks like it's that time.
All right, with it being 6 o'clock, we are going to start our June 8th Shakopee Public Schools School Board work session. Could I have Sarah please do the roll call?
Aldridge?
Here.
Brophy?
Here.
Christensen?
Here.
McKeon?
Good evening.
Tomzik?
Judy,
Here. I know you're there. Tucker, sorry. Tucker?
Here.
And Peterson?
Here. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag
of the
United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Before we move into item number 3, consideration of our agenda tonight, before we proceed, I think it would be, I'd like to pause to reflect upon the life of a fellow Metro School Board member, Mary Zhang. I said Mary, it should be Marnie, I'm sorry. Marnie was the St. Paul Public School Board Chair who passed away after a month battle with COVID-19 at the young age of 31. Marnie grew up on the east side of St. Paul, graduated from the University of Minnesota in Duluth, and was a school administrative manager for the Hmong International Academy in Minneapolis before she was elected to the St. Paul Public School Board of Education in 2017. She recently was appointed board chair earlier this year. She dedicated her adult life towards education, and her smile and positive personality would light up a room when she was present. I was fortunate to have worked with Marnie last November and December as part of the MSBA Delegate Assembly, and I can tell you firsthand that her strong leadership skills and her passion for not only education, but for the students across the state to make sure that all students receive the best education possible was always present with Marnie. She wore her leadership and her compassion on her sleeve. So I think I'd like to take a moment of silence to remember Marnie, her family, as well as the St. Paul Public School District as they mourn the loss of a great community member. Thank you. Moving on to item number 3, which is the consideration of agenda as presented. Does anyone have any changes that you would like to make to the agenda as presented this evening?
Just a quick question. We don't really have any action items for tonight, do we?
Most of it is informational. I don't believe that there are any action items unless we get to an item at some point that might require that we decide, instead of it being informational, that we want to make a decision, but I don't think any of the items would call for that this evening.
Okay, then I'll make a motion that we accept it.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion by Paul, second by Joe. Any further discussion on the agenda as presented? Sarah, could you please take a roll call?
Aldridge?
Yes.
Brophy?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
McKeon?
Yes.
Tomzik?
Yes.
Tucker?
Yes.
Ann Peterson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Moving on to We Are Shakopee Schools good news items. We ended the school year, and graduation would have been on Saturday, but we are looking forward to July 25th, where hopefully we can have a nice commencement ceremony at Vaughn Field with more information to come. But in the meantime, we have 3 items tonight to share. One is I'd like to congratulate high school student Rohan Sastry on being named a finalist for the 2019-20 Federal Reserve Essay Contest. This year's writing prompt was about free trade. Students had to answer the question, what, if anything, should government do to address the adverse consequences of free trade for some firms and individuals? The first place winner in the contest received a cash prize and a paid summer internship at the Minneapolis Fed in the summer of 2021. So congratulations to Rohan on achieving being named a finalist in this essay contest. Really hard not having these people at our meetings to recognize them, because it would really be nice to visit with them about these items. Moving on to good news item number 2 is congratulations to high school student Gotham Nair, who received the Meritorious Award in Science from the Minnesota Department of Education. The 2020 Scholars of Distinction recognizes distinguished work by highly motivated, self-directed students in one or more of the following areas: leadership, mathematics, science, social studies, STEM, or theater arts. Congratulations to Gotham on this achievement. And finally, the third good news item tonight that I would like to share is a kindergarten teacher at Jackson Elementary, Caitlin Wormuskirchen, was named a Fox 9 top teacher. I don't know if any of you had the opportunity to see that a few months ago, but it's a great honor to have a teacher recognized by Fox 9 for their work in the classroom and their engagement with their students. So congratulations, Caitlin, on a job well done, and keep up the great work.
And she's a Shakopee alum, so
yes,
even better.
I remember I was her softball coach in the summer when she was like 12 years old. So, you know, everything comes back full circle, right? So great person, following in her mother's footsteps as a teacher as well, I believe. So, all right, moving on to item number 5 in our agenda, which is the public comment section. This is the time where public comments for our teleconference school board meetings can be submitted to the school board via school board comment at shakopee.k12.mn.us. Comments must be received by 5 p.m. on the date of the meeting and will be read aloud during the public comment section of the meeting. The author's name and address must be included in the email, and anonymous comments or comments from authors that cannot be verified will not be read aloud. Tonight, we have one public comment that has been submitted, and I will read that for everyone tonight. And this is actually from Russell Dexter, who lives at 2197 Groveland Way. And the subject is in regards to high school busing, which is on our agenda for this evening. I believe it is item 6.6. But I will read the comments now, and if we need to refer back to them during our discussion, we can do so. Hello, I'm writing in regards to high school busing. I have 3 children attending high school next year that do not drive and live within the 2-mile radius to not gain access to busing. Furthermore, my wife and I are both working parents. I work in downtown Minneapolis, and my wife travels internationally often for work. The option of dropping off or picking up is very difficult for us and not feasible. We live a block east from Sunpath. Walking to school in the winter is dangerous. There are no sidewalks in the residential area I live in, and the sidewalks that exist are not shoveled in a timely manner. I know the district will probably need to make cuts this year, but I think part of the budget should be reserved to ensure kids get to school safely. There are many kids in the neighborhood that are in junior high and elementary school that also will need to be bused to high school safely when they are old enough. Like I said, it's dangerous in the winter, and it's just a matter of time before a kid will get hurt walking to school from where I live, and the high school would need to play defense and make up all the excuses that will need to be made instead of using common sense now. Thank you. And that is the only public comment that I have. So thank you to Russell for providing your comment on that particular item. Moving on to item number 6, which is the beginning of our information part of our agenda for this evening. 6.1 is a new agreement, which is a live streaming of sports and activities events in the Shakopee School District. And tonight we have with us our athletic director, Matt Hansen, along with Logan Anderson, who will be giving us a presentation in regards to the possibility of live streaming. Oh, Mike?
Yeah, if I could just pipe in before this, I just want to a tip of the cap to Matt Hansen and his team. They've been working on this for a few months, and this is an agreement that we're planning to run with a 1-year agreement. But thought, in listening to Matt and kind of, over the last couple months, just thought this is exactly the kind of thing I think that we want to bring to a school board meeting to share with you, to answer some questions, and before we roll this out and get it up and running this fall. But certainly great work by Matt and Logan. Welcome to the Shakopee Public Schools board meeting.
Happy to be here.
Well, thank you everyone for giving us a couple minutes to present. So I would say at the end of January, Logan and I started corresponding, and he had brought a proposal to start covering the Shakopee athletic contest starting this upcoming fall. And I would say typically we get a couple people that reach out to us, whether it's been in my 7 years as an AD, and some of them are frankly just not very good proposals, and some of them are met with some severe resistance because there's a lot of mostly give from the district and not getting a whole lot out of it. So when Logan sat down with his concept, I realized that I had seen him and his work with Lakeville North this year. And so what I was intrigued with was it wasn't kind of there's some bigger corporations that do kind of a one size fits all. And I would say it's not very hometown-ish. It doesn't give us a feel of you're actually covering a team, a school, with some investment involved with it. So when Logan and I started talking, I felt like I had a little bit of history with him. I talked to the athletic director at Lakeville North. They were very happy with what he's brought forward this year. And so with COVID, it got tabled a little bit, but we have kind of come around to what we feel is a pretty good agreement and setup. And I can certainly be the person to explain it, but I think it's probably better to have Logan. So I'll have Logan go, and then we are certainly available for questions. So Logan, go ahead.
All right. Well, first of all, just again, I'm Logan Anderson. Thank you for giving me a couple minutes just to share some information with what me and Mr. Hansen have planned for you. And if we just skip to the second slide. We'll just start with what exactly this is, and what I called it with Lakeville North is ellenpanthers.live. And essentially it's a hometown broadcast platform that spotlights an individual school, in this case, of course, Shakopee High School, and with over somewhere in the 70 to 90 different broadcasts per year in a normal schedule, where it is, again, focused on with one broadcaster who wants to be the hometown voice of one team. Coverage will include broadcasts of numerous different sports and activities, and we try to distribute everything about as evenly as we possibly can between boys and girls. With our first schedule with Lakeville North, there was slightly more on the boys' side just because there was nothing really to offset wrestling and football as much as we'd like, but it was within like 5 to 10 broadcasts as co-ed as we could make it possible. We support this with sponsors from local businesses in the school community, and that makes it free for viewers. And we use a high quality software system to be able to do a really professional broadcast of local high school athletics that you just don't see very often, at least around the metro here. We'll skip to the next slide. I just kind of want to go over a little bit of what worked, because the first school that I brought onto this was Lakeville North, and I worked with them last year, probably just about this time. And we, without a spring season broadcast, over 85 plus activities, sports, and coaches shows, and had over 21,000 unique plays, which is basically like a unique view without going deep into the weeds of what the analytics mean. We sold over $35,000 in sponsorships in year one. And before COVID-19, we're expecting some major growth. We ran into the fact that it was an unknown platform. No one was doing it. There was no history of it. So I think that scared some people away. But now that we can say, hey, go to this website and see what we've done. The resistance has been going away. But that's irrelevant for what you guys will get, but it will be similar in my estimation. Next slide. There's a little bit of equipment that we need to get started, and there's a couple different ways we can do it, but talking with Mr. Hanson, he thinks it's best if the district purchases the equipment, then when you guys own it, if you get rid of me in the future, you still have it. If you want to use it for some other academic reason, it's your equipment. But it would be about $2,500 for the software and equipment. The software program we use is called Production Truck. It's a yearly fee. We'd need a laptop, computer, headset, microphones, an audio mixer, video conversion device, assorted cables, and little doodads and converters to make everything work. But it'll be somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000. I would guess closer to the $2,500, depending on what you guys already have hiding in your storage that we can use and what you don't. Next slide. I've been working ahead, and because this is our second school, and I don't want to have a large collection of schools. I think in my future plans, maybe work with 2 or 3, because it allows me to give lots of attention to the community and the schools that I'm working with. And I do personally the play-by-play for the Lakeville North games. Jason Doro is the person who I've already agreed, with your approval, will be the person who's hired to do the lion's share of Shakopee games. He's a graduate of Northwestern in Evanston, Illinois, the Medill School of Journalism. It's a very prestigious school. Right now, he does a lot of stuff in the metro for high school and the small college level. He does St. Kate's basketball. He does occasional Augsburg College games and does a lot of stuff for Minnesota Prep Spotlight, and is one of the people in their little group of guys that does a lot of the state tournament and the championship games and things like that. That he's one of their top guys, and we're going to be lucky to have him. If you want to hear his work, you can do so by going to jasondoro.com. That's DOROW. He has samples of what it would sound like there and what it will sound like for Shakopee if we move forward. Next slide. What I think makes what I do with schools different than what other of those larger one-size-fits-all platforms is that I want this to be a win-win for both myself and for the school, which is why I'm proposing for the first $35,000 of revenue that I'm able to find in sponsorship sales, 25% of that goes directly back to Shakopee High School to put towards athletics, put towards, and I don't know, I don't get to decide what it goes towards, but you get it back right away. And I keep 75 of that for production costs to pay for announcers and a little bit for commission as well. After, if we exceed that mark of 35,000, we give even more back. We'll give 40% to Shakopee High School, and then it'll go, my percent will go down to 60. Next slide. Some of the non-revenue benefits for the school that I've discussed with Matt Hansen is, first and foremost, we allow interested students to take part in the process as camera operators, producers, and if they're interested and prove that they have a little bit of talent towards it, I have no problem having some of them be part of the broadcast as color commentators, sideline reporters, whatever they're interested in. We do want to keep the professional quality of the broadcast there, so they need to have a little bit of aptitude, but I would be fine working into that as we went forward. It will obviously be an increase in exposure for athletes and the school. That benefits everybody. And it really, one of the things we have also talked about is spotlighting academic, or maybe I should just say non-athletic work, fine arts, so forth, of Shakopee students during halftime and feature shows. And one of the things that this allows is friends, relatives, alumni, grandparents, anyone who's out of the area now has a free platform to watch their loved ones compete, or we can stream concerts. We can do all sorts of different things as we move forward. One of the things we've noticed in Lakeville is that it's really helped strengthen the bond between the school and the business community. It's a win-win situation when the businesses are supporting the athletes and they get a chance to put commercials and educate people on their products and services on the games during an active audience in front of them. And maybe most importantly this year with COVID-19 and nobody really knowing what that is going to mean for sports, for fans in stadiums, I think it's too early to say that it's going to happen that way, but if it does, this could be the only way for people to follow Sabres activities if it were to come to a limited fan or fanless situation. Next slide. And this is just to open it up for questions. I hope that explains everything, at least somewhat clearly, and I'm happy to answer any questions anyone might have.
Okay, Logan, I got actually 2 questions for you on this. What would happen if, we went out to the business community for sponsorships and, nobody wants to step up? Then where would the cost come, or the money have to come from to do this?
Well, that's not, we don't need very much to really do it. So I would be absolutely shocked if we were not able to get enough for that. So you guys won't have to do it. I have 10 plus years of media sales, and I will go out and talk to them. Really, we would need that initial investment plus about $6,000 for the announcer to cover the cost, if in an absolute worst case scenario. But I don't expect that would be an issue again in 1 year with no track record. We sold 35,000 for North, and I expect it to be easier when I can say, here's what we're doing in Shakopee. It's going to be just like this, only with a different school. So there's a model and a track record of success. I would say we would cross that bridge when we get there, but I would be shocked if that was an issue.
Okay, and how does this differ from, say, Live Barn?
So Live Barn, if I understand correctly, is I don't think they have announcers from what I've seen, what they do on hockey. It's similar in the fact that, I mean, it's a one camera stream, but the biggest difference is that we're going to have an announcer who is going to be the voice of the Sabres. This is not somebody parachuting in or changing it up. I mean, in 80 or 90 games, we'll probably have to find a substitute a few times, but you'll have a consistent voice, and it's going to be, you know, we don't want to have somebody be overly homer, but they're going to be favoring Shakopee on their broadcast. They're going to be a hometown voice. They're going to be able to get to know the coaches and the kids and just bring a different perspective than somebody who's doing a game of the week in the Metro will be able to bring.
Okay, thank you.
Logan.
Oh, sorry, Judy. One thing to add is if we were to go to a Live Barn type situation, there's a couple different companies out there that are offering something similar to that. You know, cameras can range up to the $8,000 to $10,000 a piece, and that would be solely on the district's dime if we were to decide to go something like that, where we're streaming services, whether it be, you know, at the hockey rink or in our gyms or other facilities.
I would also say that what I do, again, I want it to be a win-win for the school, and there's revenue generated for the school. Most of these other ones, I guess I have not been part of those conversations, but I would really be surprised if it's as high a number as what I offer.
Okay.
Logan, does the $2,500 initial investment include that annual fee?
Say that again, the annual fee for?
Well, you said something about an annual fee to use the facilities or through.
So there's an annual fee for the software that we use.
Right.
It's about $1,200 a year. Everything else in there is like cameras, computers and stuff. Once you have it, you'll have it. But if you continue to do this with me each year, you will need to do it's $1,200 to $1,500 per year for that.
Okay. And what I'm asking is that amount included in your $2,500
Yes.
initial investment? Okay. That's what I was wondering about. Another thing that I think would be really important for Shakopee, and I know you probably can't balance arts and activities against sports because they don't have the same number of opportunities for viewing, but it would be really important to us to consider those non-athletic pieces.
And let me step in right there. So that was part of the reason. So initially it was mostly athletics, and in talking to Dr. Redman and Mr. Palicki, it was vital that we were supporting our fine arts, and that was the only way we were going to even entertain going into a contract, is if we could support our fine arts as well.
Sounds great. Thanks.
Hey, Logan.
Some of the things that we tried to do with Lakeville North is we made sure to do spotlights on the marching bands at halftime, as well as the dance team. We had scheduled to do a band concert that actually got canceled because I think they actually had to play a playoff game against Shakopee. So it was on the same day and they had to move it. But honestly, concerts and things like that are easier to do than sports. We don't really need an announcer. You just point the camera and hook up a nice microphone, and we can do as many of those as you guys would want.
Hey, Logan, when it came to the revenue split, was that does that start over fresh every year? So it's the first 35,000 each year, or is it just 35,000 the first year?
So 35,000 is just a number I came up with because that's what I needed to. It's what I needed to make to cover my costs for the announcer and make it worthwhile for me to be doing it. This is my full-time job, and it's got to work both ways. But I mean, if you wanted to renegotiate that in the future, it would certainly be possible, but that's where that number came from.
So it does start over each year then?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions for either Matt or Logan?
Just to comment, I do see an opportunity to leverage the academies, and just off the top of my head, I'm thinking arts and communication, but there does definitely seem to be a correlation to making this as much as an academic experience and learning opportunity as much as, you know, the value it brings for spotlighting Shakopee events.
I'm assuming we wouldn't move forward with this until we know if we're going to have athletics in the fall.
So what we would have to do, I would have to start getting pre-sales around the community here as soon as it's approved and ready to go. But we would certainly have it set to where if there were no sports, there will be no billing. So we did a lot of prepayments last year. We're not doing that this year for North, and we would not be able to do that this year just because of all the uncertainty with the season. That is correct.
So are we, I guess this maybe is a question for Mike, are we looking at approving this? Is this an action item for the board tonight, or is this informational only?
Yeah, this, we've made the agreement with Logan, so this was just information only. This is one of those things I think sometimes we launch and we don't bring, you know, to the board. But in terms of, you know, our financial risk, no offense, Logan, but our financial risk is $2,500. You know, in terms of that investment. And if we have, you know, if we run sports and we do the activities, even without fans, I know it'll be successful. And, you know, we're starting with a 1-year agreement, which gives us an opportunity to, you know, see what it's like. I think both ways. I mean, you always learn. But this just seemed, you know, to be a win-win all the way around. And then you throw in that possibility of restricted fans at events due to, you know, COVID-19 and other things. But even above and beyond that, if there were no pandemic, you know, like Matt alluded to, there's a lot of folks out there that they're attempting to make a lot of money off public school districts and high school athletics and activities. And usually for the sole benefit of, you know, their corporation or their business. And this to me, you know, part of my motivation, this feels like a real partnership with Logan. And so we just wanted to bring it and just say, hey, this is something we're doing this fall, and give you an opportunity to ask questions, you know, kind of straight from the horse's mouth here with Logan, rather than me trying to explain it and go, hey, what exactly are they starting? And, you know, and it's great. You asked a lot of the same questions I asked, and I'm excited about the activities. And I think that's neat to be able to do the, you know, the concerts and those things. And then I just see the possibilities for just a natural showcase at halftimes or pre-games or other shows for just all the other great things going on at Shakopee High School. So I'm excited about it.
So I have one question in regards to the balance of the games, boys, girls, fine arts, athletics. I know that this is an opportunity for us to, you know, reach an audience that may not have the opportunity to get into our facilities or to even travel to a different city. So I guess my question is more around, are these all going to be home games only, or will they be games that might be at a, you know, a highly competitive event, maybe with like an Eden Prairie or a Prior Lake or Lakeville North, for example?
What we did with North is that we tried to do all of the football games because as what the sponsors want, those are the ones that drive the numbers. And they averaged over 1,000 people watching per game. A volleyball game or a girls basketball game would get 200 or 300. Still a good viewing, but not the same. Then we did mostly, we tried to pick the best possible home games. If you guys were interested and the other school cooperates, I would be happy to pick some select road games. It wouldn't be an issue. It actually might make some things easier because, for example, trying to make the schedule work to get enough games for boys soccer, girls soccer, and volleyball, they all play on the same day. So it's hard to get enough home games to make it work. But I think that's probably the starting point, but certainly we can do road games if it makes sense.
Great. Are there any other questions tonight for Matt or Logan? Seeing none, thank you, Matt and Logan, for the information, and I look forward to hearing more and seeing more about what this partnership could do for our programs in Shakopee. So thank
All
you.
right, thank you very much for allowing me to talk to you today.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for the time.
All right, moving on to our next agenda item, which is 6.2, Shakopee University pilot and how that went for the first year. Tonight we have Nancy Toole, Dale Anderson, and Annie Reinitz. I believe those are the three that are presenting. Is that correct?
Yes, that is. Yep.
All right.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I have to birdwalk just a little bit because we are working today, Annie would say the same thing, with our advanced courses with high school teachers. And one of those areas is our video and broadcast production course that is called Creative Professional. It has a number of different components, but those are exactly the type of opportunities we need for our kids. And so excited about that. And actually already sent a little email to Matt. So, just want you to know that. Mainly what's going to happen is Dale and we are going to present. We are at what I would call the midpoint for our pilot on Shakopee U. And Dale's going to kind of kick us off for talking a little bit and reminding the board about why we're doing this. It was a collaborative effort between our union and our district to try to look at micro-credentialing for teachers. And he's going to talk a little bit about why. And then Annie's going to talk a little bit as the main facilitator about how it's going so far. So Dale?
Yeah, so can you hear me? Are we good? All right. So the primary things that we were trying to accomplish here, I think there's some really cool opportunities for us to work together to try and help provide some additional high quality training to teachers and do it in a manner that allows them to also benefit by being able to move across on the salary schedule. And there's obviously some big advantages to doing that. One is that it helps you with retention because the only place that lane change will matter is here because it's not a portable degree that they can take from one place to another. It's not portable credits, it's credits that are unique to Shakopee. It also allows the district to really focus on the areas that they are most really wanting to drive home with teachers. And so in this particular cohort, that's looking at those 4 critical instructional practices, and the best practices around implementing those things: authentic learning, student-centered learning, digital learning, gradual release of responsibility, all those things. And also at the same time, trying to deepen their understanding of the characteristics, beliefs, and practices of a Shakopee educator that we are, trying to drive home. And so the cool thing about this particular program in terms of not only are we doing this kind of together as the union and the district, but at the same time, we have these, we originally kind of thought, hey, we'll do this with new teachers. We were having a hard time kind of getting it, just I think with all of the different things that are going on, getting a full numbers to maybe do that. But we got educators from across the range of teaching here who participated this year, and Annie's going to walk you through kind of specifically how the program's been working and what how it's been received and kind of what the feedback has been on it. All I can say is I think it's just one more really neat way that we can invest in teachers and they can really again kind of pick up these critical skills and learnings that will make them more effective educators. Annie?
Yes. And okay, I've got my mic on, correct?
because I can't see you all. So hopefully that is true. All right. So let's dig in just a little bit and take a look at what Shakopee University is doing right now. Like Dale and Nancy said, we are about halfway through our coursework. Currently, Shakopee University is a pilot program. And so the union allowed us to have 20 participants in the Shakopee University cohort. And so we did get 20 participants. You can see there that we have representatives from across every single one of our schools and every single one of our buildings, which makes for a great diverse group of teachers. So we span all the way from E to 12. We also, whoops. Well, I apologize. All right, we have 5 courses that they take. And those, well, I apologize, 5 courses that they take. The first one we started with was Characteristics of a Shakopee Educator. There we really worked on beliefs and practices and began some of our equity work, reading that Pedagogy of Confidence and the 7 strategies for self-assessment. And that was done in the fall this year. This spring, we took course number 2, which is Gradual Release of Responsibility. We really looked at embedding those formative assessments and how we can really help open up that brain for our kids so that they can see all those covert thinking processes and making them overt for our students. This summer, we're actually going to be taking digital learning and authentic learning at the same time. So currently, starting on June 1st, they began their coursework. They're reading 2 books, Technology Around Technology, Learning First, Technology Second, and Students at the Center to create more personalized learning. They're going to do this through synchronous and asynchronous work, meaning they have from June to August to go through and work through coursework at self-paced in Canvas. And then in the middle of August, the 17th through the 20th, we are going to go ahead and meet together, hopefully face-to-face. If not, we'll do it virtually. And we're going to build out some plans incorporating and embedding digital and authentic learning together. And then our last course, which will be this fall, is student-centered learning. And we're really going to come back into that foundation of equity work, reading culturally responsive teaching in the brain, and really diving into how we can better personalize and differentiate instruction to better serve all of our students. What's been really exciting is that about halfway through the program, we have gotten the opportunity to get some participant feedback. And I'm going to show you a selection of that participant feedback here. If you would like to look at the full results, I have those for you, and I can certainly send you the entirety of the survey as well. So you can take a look. Their understanding of gradual release has grown through their participation. The readings and assignments seem to be fairly at the pace and at the rigor that they are looking for. The instructors facilitated the class that increased their understanding of the concepts. And then one more, the course developed my ability to apply theory into practice. And that is one of the biggest things is we really truly are helping these teachers live out loud our instructional framework. So we know that we all agree and hold these beliefs and theories, but how do we really translate those into the day-to-day in the classroom? Graphs are super exciting. They are not my love language, but this is more that actual feedback as we talk to teachers. So these are some of the comments. I'll let you go ahead and take a look at some of those right now for just a couple seconds. And because long pauses of silence are super awkward on Google Meet, again, you can return to these in the notes at any time to read through some of their comments. But what is really exciting is that doing some of this hybrid and blended learning in Shakopee University, the comments said that that's really helped prepare them for what they're doing right now in distance learning and will help prepare them in the future. Per graduation, they will have to complete the entire course sequence. So all 5 classes, they will receive a lane change, which is really a great incentive for that micro credentialing. And so I just want to sweeten the deal here because Logan said he was going to give you a percentage. And I will give you 100% of the revenue that I collect from Shakopee University. I unfortunately collect 0. But I will give all of those $0 back to you in any way, shape, or form you would like them. So if you guys have questions.
As our treasurer, Joe, can you give us a rate of return on that?
Yes,
Yes, you are. I will say, I will actually say this as a joke. But in all seriousness, what has been really cool is to see this as sustained job embedded professional development and teachers saying, you know, this isn't a one and done. I'm seeing this change practice in my classroom. And that has been really neat to see those changes and to see that learning. So any questions?
This isn't a question so much as I did read through all of the teacher comments, and I was really pleased to see how many were very appreciative of embedded coaching. So
Yes.
is that right, that if they're in this program, then they agree to the classroom coaching?
Yeah, so one thing that we do, and I think this is really unique to our program, is that it's divided up into different kind of sections. We have some face-to-face time. They have time that they are doing their independent learning. They have been given a critical friend. So they have someone that already works with them closely and they can reflect in. So they ask to go into their critical friend's room and observe other teachers. And then lastly, each of those courses come with a coaching cycle. So for the first course on beliefs and practices, a coach worked with them for up to 2 weeks and really got into their classroom to help support them. And then again, this spring through the gradual release, they did some videotaping of their lessons. The coach came in so that they could get really good feedback. And a lot of the feedback had to deal with coaching and the videotaping. They said, I don't want to do this. It's very nerve-wracking to have someone come in my room. But they said they really enjoyed it. And that was some of the best feedback they had. So that was really exciting to see.
And I do have a question too. I thought this was just for new teachers to the district, but Dale had mentioned that, I think Dale mentioned that it could be teachers at any level. So then just to make sure I'm understanding this correctly, if it's an experienced teacher and they're already, you know, several lanes away from a bachelor's degree, they make a lane change no matter where they are on the schedule.
They do make a lane change. So if they're at MA plus 10, they get to move to MA plus 20.
Okay.
There are a few exceptions, right? You cannot go from BA 30 to master's. This won't actually get you your master's lane, right? Although I feel like I definitely am worth it. No, I'm just so there are some things like that. It's not going to move you from the MA 30 to the specialist lane. But other than that, you are able to make a lane change. What I do think is cool, and you are right, Dale said that at first, we wanted to originally open this up to year 3 and 2 teachers, thinking that this would be a good time to help them move across lanes. And we got a solid start, about 10 teachers that way. And then the other 10 came when we opened it up to all of our teachers. And what's great is to see teachers who have said, you know, I have been here for 15, 16 years. And I haven't moved from my master's, and it's time for me to get learning again. And I didn't know how to get learning. And I love to, and I want to put my time and energy to things that will help me become a better Shakopee teacher, not just taking classes from Learner's Edge. And that's been really neat to see and learn together from a variety of teachers, both young and veteran.
Absolutely. Congratulations. The program looks excellent.
Yeah, I love everything about this. I love, you know, as Dale said, the retention side or retention strategy. I'm an HR professional. That's right up my alley. But to use somebody else's keyword for this year, this is alignment at its best, right? Mm-hmm. This is teaching our teachers how to teach the way we want them to teach. There's never enough time for professional development. So this is focused learning and coaching. I think it's exceptional, above and beyond the fact that it helps retain our teachers in our district. So thank you for all that you're doing. And Judy, when you said you had a question, I thought it was going to be if you could sign up.
I would love to.
Well, I love having Annie as a teacher, so we'd be good.
If any of you would like to come in as a guest speaker or adjunct professor, I welcome all of you in to our course for student-centered learning. We would have a great time starting to create more personalized learning plans. That'd be so fun.
Are there any other questions for Annie, Nancy, or Dale? This is awesome, by the way. I love seeing the results. And I know you're only halfway through. So I look forward to the back half and seeing a full year or a full program cycle and what the future holds for these types of opportunities for our teachers. Because I think it's excellent and it's extremely important, as Matt said, to retain our teachers that we have in Shakopee. So we have great ones.
That's what I was just going to add, that we'll probably be back after the first of the year in another 6 months or so to decide, if at some point you want to consider moving it out of a pilot stage and what might that look like. So that would be the logical next conversation here as we continue through the fall.
Great. Any other questions or comments?
Probably should just do some commending of Annie for her leadership in this area and all the work she's done in putting together, these courses and the various work. It's a lot of work.
Can you tell?
It's a lot of work to pull all that together and to get those kinds of results from teachers, who are taking things, and you look at those results and they're very, very, very pleased and feeling very good about that. And she deserves a lot of kudos for that. So
I would just add too, we've had a couple of our ICs, our instructional coaches, really help with it too. Mara Sunday, Monica Miller, and then all of our instructional coaches have been part of it to some degree. But yeah, Annie got the other duties as assigned. But she has done an awesome job, like Dale said.
All right. Way to go, everyone that was involved. All right. Thank you, Dale, Nancy, Annie, for the information. Keep up the great work. We look forward to hearing more in January. All right, moving on to item 6.3, which gets into the start of our financial discussions for our meeting tonight. 6.3 is the 2019-2020 budget update. Bill, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, and good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Redmond. Thank you for the opportunity to present the 2019-20 general fund budget update now as of May 31st. So getting towards the end of the fiscal year. It's included up on your screen for viewing as well. As you would expect, our buckets on both the revenue side and the expenditure side in the general fund are really starting to fill up now that we are 11 of 12 months complete in fiscal year 2019-20. And I know the board is familiar with this sheet, but just by way of orientation, you'll see revenue categories, expenditure categories by object dimension, and then our fund balance projections on the bottom. And then reading from left to right, you'll see our 2017-18 final numbers, 2018-19 final numbers, our current year revised budget, which is fiscal year 2020, what we have received or spent year to date, again, as of May 31st, and then finally our budget remaining. And then just some percentages on the right in the current year compared to the prior year and the second prior year as well. On the revenue side, our state aid appears to be tracking. Our federal is behind, but that has to do entirely with timing. So our federal revenue is drawn down via a website called CERBS, and we have just delayed that process a little bit as we have gone forward with our software conversion from Infinite Campus into Skyward. So that's certainly not a cash flow issue. It is merely a timing issue why we're behind this year compared to the prior year and the second prior year. I, in fact, have queued up a drawdown of our federal funds to happen tomorrow on June 9th. So would expect that would be much closer to the prior year just based on timing. Our property taxes are tracking where we'd like them to be. The one area that we are behind, as we have discussed on the revenue side, is our local. So our things like our activity fees, our gate receipts, things of that nature. You can see we have collected about 84% of our budget in the local category compared to 107% last year and 101% the year prior. As we've discussed, some of the implications, the financial implications of the COVID-19 pandemic. On the revenue side, we know that we will be behind, and obviously our gate receipts, our activity fees related to spring activities and sports that did not happen, and that's reflected here on the revenue side. So overall, on the revenue side, we are tracking within where I believe we should be from a budget standpoint. Again, the federal one, that's purely timing based off of those serves draws. And then the local fees and gate receipts are down as we would have expected. On the expenditure side of the ledger, as I mentioned, we are, just by way of review, through May 31st, which is obviously 11 of 12 months. If you take 11 into 12, that's 92%. Again, the reason why the categories here and percent spent are closer to 92% is that summer payoff, right? We talked about that at the last board meeting. We have our June payoff for July and August payments to get us through to September. So that's the reason why the variance there. Tracking a positive variance under the employee benefits category. So that's largely related to health and dental and some of our other contractual obligations for things like tax sheltered annuity, employer contributions in that area. Cautiously optimistic in the areas of purchase services and supplies. But it should be noted that we do have a little bit of a lag time in posting some of our transactions related to the software change. So that's not a large dollar amount, but just tracking that a little bit of lag, and would expect that to catch up here after the end of the fiscal year once we get all of that posted related to the software change. So overall, we have spent just under 75% of our general fund budget compared to 80% last year and 80.75% spent in the second prior year. So we are tracking towards a slight positive variance on the expenditure side, as we would expect, and we'll continue to track that through the end of the fiscal year, and obviously in preparations of our audit as well. So I know this is just a monthly summary, but we are tracking where we would expect, or like I mentioned, slightly positive on the expenditure side. So with that, I'll pause and happy to answer any questions should you have them on the monthly budget update.
Are there any questions for Bill in regards to the budget, updated budget as presented? I think it looks great. Everything seems to be tracking. I know that COVID has thrown a little bit of a monkey wrench into everything as far as trying to predict and getting in dollars, aid and that sort of thing. So, but I think it's looking pretty good. Any further questions? Seeing none, we will move on to, thank you, Bill, for that update. And I know that you're the next item, 6.4 as well. And that is the presentation of next year's draft budget for the 2020-2021 school year.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. In a way, it's crazy to be talking about 2021 already, but here we are. And included on your screen, you'll see just a brief PowerPoint related to the 2020-2021 school year budget. Just should be noted, with everything that's been new and unpredicted over the last few months, we have started talking about this fiscal 21 budget, you'll remember, back in January and February. And so the information on here, although it's not new, it is information that the board and certainly the finance committee has seen in previous meetings. This is just a summary document sort of tracking along with that information that we've really been talking about since last winter. And then finally, just a last point of orientation, we will review tonight and then we will be seeking board approval on a fiscal year 2021 budget at the next board meeting on June 22nd. So without further ado, we will get into the next slide on the presentation. Thank you, Sarah. As we so often do, we start our budget process by looking at our budget process and timeline. So as we know, our budget process in Shakopee is a continuous 4-step process, and each step requires school board approval and is open for public inspection and comment. And looking through the lens of the fiscal 21 budget process, really started last year on December 9th with the school board approving the property tax levy for 2019 taxes payable in 2020 via the Truth in Taxation presentation last year on December 9th. That was really the first step in the fiscal 21 budget planning. Step 2 is what we're doing tonight, looking at the adopted budget for fiscal year 2021 And like I mentioned, we will seek board approval for that at the next meeting on June 22nd in accordance with the Minnesota statute, which states that we have to have an approved budget before the start of the fiscal year on July 1st. Revised budget, the school board generally would approve a revised budget in December, January, or February, depending on the year, based on information and estimates that were not previously known at the time of the adopted budget. So larger variances that could impact the revised budget, things like enrollment, things like changes in state aid assumptions, things like changes in contractual obligations that are up for negotiations. So in that area. And then finally, everyone's favorite topic, the annual financial report and audit. So after we close our books, we will have an independent audit, and that report is generally presented to the board in November or December after the end of the fiscal year. Well, I know that's review, but just important to look at our timeline before we go on to the next slide. So here is our budget for the fiscal year 2021 governmental funds. So you can see just from an orientation standpoint, looking at governmental funds. So by governmental funds, I'm talking about the general fund, food service fund, community service fund, our building construction fund, and then our debt service fund. So you'll see on the left, our proposed beginning fund balance amounts, and then our fiscal 21 revenue, fiscal 21 expenditures, our projected surplus or deficit, and then where our projected fund balance in total is projected to be at June 30, 2021. And then in the case of the general fund, I have broken out the unassigned amount just to break that out and isolate that as well. And it should be noted that in food service and community service, the column on the far left, there is a difference from what we've previously looked at as a result of the 1920 revised budget. And that does include, as you can see in the notes at the bottom, projected fund balances and food service and community ed include fiscal 20 estimated revenue impact from the COVID-19 pandemic. So as we've discussed previously, food service fund and community service fund are largely fee-based, and the result of the pandemic is we are projecting a loss in that fee-based revenue, and that is reflected in the beginning fund balances for fiscal 21. And then finally, looking at the general fund, nothing new here. The estimated revenue, $99.3 million, estimated expenditures of $101.8 million. We're all familiar with that projected deficit for next year of $2.542 million in the general fund, and where our unassigned fund balance is projected to go as of June 30, 2021 at $1,060,000, just about 1.04% of our general fund expenditures. And as Dr. Redmond has mentioned previously in presentations, that 1.06 million, that 1%, that sort of critical low point. And obviously later on tonight and in the coming months, we'll be talking about our financial plan to address that in terms of budget adjustments moving forward. Going to the next slide. The first of two slides looking at some of our budget planning assumptions. So this has largely been information that's been discussed earlier, but you can see that our basic state aid formula allowance, which again is the bulk of revenue that we receive in the general fund, we are assuming a 2% increase for next year, fiscal 21, in accordance with current law, which would bring the basic state aid formula allowance per pupil unit up from $6,438 per pupil unit this year to $6,567 per pupil unit next year, an increase of 2%, which has been rather common over the last 3 bienniums. But as you'll see later on, the impact of the ongoing pandemic, we are downgrading that forecast for the out years to include fiscal 22 and 23. And then some other assumptions on the expenditure side. Salary and wages and employee benefits adjustments have been made based on known and expected contractual obligations for next year. Our largest contract is the teacher's contract, and that has been settled through June 30 of 2021. And so that amount has been budgeted. Contracts that expire at June 30, we have included estimates for what those contractual obligations will look like for next year as well. A 2% increase in non-wage items, things like purchase services. A large one is obviously our contracted transportation would be in that area. And then as we have every year, staffing adjustment based off of enrollment projections. So if we're projecting an increase in enrollment, you'll have staffing adjustment as a result of that. In our case, where we are projecting a slight decrease in enrollment for next year from current year budget. And so a staffing adjustment based off of that enrollment projection for next year as well. Next slide. Looking at our enrollment projections, you can see that the far two left columns are our actual enrollment. For 2017-18, we were at 8,266 students. Last year, 2018-19, we finished the year at 8,247 students. We are projected this year, our revised budget was built on the assumption or estimate of 8,281 students. And next year, we're projecting 8,200 students. And obviously, student enrollment is a key factor in determining staffing levels from one year to the next, and also important in determining a revenue budget. Approximately 80% of our general fund revenue is linked to enrollment. So estimating enrollment and getting close is very, very important, especially on the revenue side of our budget. Next slide. Just a little bit on the legislative summary and the COVID-19 impact. I touched on the 2% increase that we're assuming for next year's budget. We have heard nothing that would lead us to believe that we are not going to receive that in fiscal year 2021. But we have downgraded our assumptions for fiscal year 2022 and fiscal year 2023. We have downgraded those assumptions, increases in state aid to 0% in both years, which based off of our estimated revenue, our estimated enrollment, that revenue impact each year is about 1.2 million. So stated another way, 2% new money from the state based off of our current enrollment is about 1.2 million in additional revenue each year. And so 0%, that is a loss of 1.2 million in fiscal 22 and 23. So obviously significant to our bottom line.
Bill, I think that's prudent to go with the assumption of flat, just with the the problem that's facing the state, right? They went from a $1.5 billion surplus to a $2.5 billion deficit in the blink of an eye. I'm glad to hear that we aren't talking about anything more. We're not hearing any talk of anything more detrimental than that, such as shifting funding or delaying funding. I know what kind of ripple effects that had the last time we had to go through this. So I'm going to knock on wood with saying that I hope we continue to not hear anything about that.
Absolutely, and well said. On to the next slide.
Hey, Bill, real quick question on that. You don't think there's any possible way they would actually decrease it, do you?
Mike, are you comfortable answering that question?
I am. And Joe, I think what Bill said is there's been nothing of a constructive or a concrete nature. But I think I wrote in, that weekly wrap that I sent out maybe 4 or 6 weeks ago. It's the first time I've heard the word unallotment used in over a decade. And that hasn't been thrown around much now in recent weeks. I think, we're sorting out. We did receive some good news from the Federal CARES Act, but we're sorting out what that means in terms of that disbursement. So I would say never, but I think our best estimate is they're going to stick to the fiscal 21 budget as set forth. When you get to fiscal 22 and 23, I think all bets are off the table. So
yeah, that was what I was referring to, is not next year, because it's basically law. I was talking about 22 and 23. I mean, you're right. Anything's off the table, but that would be devastating, you could say.
It would. Yeah, I don't think it. We think we've hit a very low estimate that I would like to think we're not going to miss. I don't think it's going to be lower than that. I've heard nobody talk about that. There are issues that could have an impact, like Matt alluded to, where you're delaying the payments. which now you're borrowing to, you know, for cash flow and liquidity and some of those things. But that hasn't been kicked around either. So I'm hopeful that by putting, you know, the 0% there, that it's a reasonable expectation and that hopefully state funding would be above that. I just listened to myself saying that. Yeah, boy, that sounds odd. Yeah, I hope it'd be above 0. Yeah, but I really do, and I think it's very serious in fiscal 22 and 23. So no, we've heard nothing that would indicate it would be a negative or holding back or withdrawing, and I'm not even sure how that would work. You know, and that's why I have the fear of the fiscal 21 where something's been budgeted. The word on allotment would be where that could be pulled back. But I don't know that we've ever seen us go backwards, you know, like a negative number. So that's unprecedented. It'd be great to keep it that way.
Well, this is the year of unprecedented stuff.
Bill, I have a question. You on the, I think it was a previous slide or 2 slides previous, you're projecting the 8,200 students, which is a decline of 81 students from the previous year. That number, is that based on number of kids graduating and a lower number of kindergartners coming into the district? Is that how you're coming to that number?
It is, Christy, exactly. It is that, and then just rolling kids through the grades. The progression, kindergartners becoming first graders becoming second. Yep, exactly right.
And I would add, we did have a discussion, Bill, Dave, and I would say mathematically 1 out of every 100 times we're going to end up at exactly, and you know, at a number that ends in 00. So it's odd to hit at 8,200, but that's what it did. They ran their program, they did their estimates, more graduating than coming in, and we went, man, that looks like a round number. Well, this time it was the specific number the model showed. So one out of every 100 times will come with that type of number for you on average.
Thank you.
Going to the next slide, the next few slides are some pie charts. The first one here looking at general fund revenue budget. So breaking out the piece of the pie on the revenue side based off of where our money comes from. So you can see far and away 82% of our revenue budget comes in the general fund from the state. 14% levy revenue. So that's a combination of mostly non-voter approved levy revenue for things like long-term facilities maintenance, safe schools levy, operating capital, things of that nature. We also have the voter approved levy for our capital projects levy. Our technology levy is in there as well. We get 2% of our revenue comes from the federal government in the form of title funding and also our federal special education funding as well. And then other local revenue accounts for the other 2%. So there's been a nice conversation tonight about the importance from a sustainability standpoint of adequate increases in state aid. And you can see it really reflected here as an illustration. We're having great conversations about the importance of levy revenue from a sustainability standpoint, but in the 100-year history, state aid is just too big of a piece of the pie for all school districts in the state for it to be the underfunding to continue. It's just 82% is a huge piece of the pie from the state and is visually represented here. Next slide. General fund expenditures by object dimension. You can see here, that's the 80% that we've talked about. School districts are people intensive organizations. And when you add up our salary and wages and employee benefits, that amounts to 80%. And as we have previously discussed, the other 20%, and frankly, that 80% would be larger. Our contracted transportation is within the purchase services area. And if we owned our own buses and we employed our own bus drivers, obviously we would be over 80%. But that other remaining 20% tends to be fairly fixed. We're looking at measures to address classroom supply budgets, things of that nature. we're kind of doing what we can there from a budget standpoint, but the bulk of the budget really is in people, salary and wages and employee benefits. And it should be noted that all school districts are this way in Minnesota. You're not going to find any district where that pie, salary and wages and employee benefits don't account for the majority of the expenditures by cost object. That's just school districts in our state. Next slide. And then finally, looking at general fund expenditures another way by program dimension, that you can see we spend 46% of our general fund budget on elementary and secondary regular instruction, 1% on vocational, 19% on special education, another 10% on instructional support. Pupil support accounts for 8%. Fiscal and other fixed cost, really the bulk of what's in there is our property insurance. Sites and buildings accounts for 6% of our budget. Administration 7%, and district support services 2%. There's a lot on here. How I look at this slide is what is instructional and student-based expenditures versus other expenditures. When I look at instructional and student-based, I add up elementary and secondary regular instruction, vocational, special education, instructional support, and pupil support services. So as I look at that, approximately 84%, if you add up those percentages, of our general fund budget is spent on student-based needs. And that's something to really be celebrated, that 84 cents on every dollar is spent on student-based needs. And that is fairly high in the districts that I've been in. So something to be proud of there. Next slide. Again, just by way of review, we've talked quite a bit about our general fund financial position. The best indicator of a school district's financial health is in its fund balance, and you can see where we're projected to go. So I won't elaborate too much more because we have discussed this before, and obviously later on tonight and moving forward, the district will be discussing measures to address the fund balance position as is projected to be at the end of fiscal year 2021. Next slide. This is just another slide to look at our financial position and this time bringing in the other components of our fund balance. So you can see our unassigned fund balance projection at the end of fiscal 21 is projected to be $1,060,000. We do have other fund balance, albeit in smaller amounts. We have an assigned fund balance of $267,000 restricted. So again, the bulk of what makes up that 2.1 million is our fund balance projection and operating capital. So think furniture, fixtures, and equipment, our long-term facilities maintenance, and our capital projects, our technology levy as well. That all flows through into the restricted fund balance. And then our non-spendable, things like inventory, and also our prepaid expenditures, just an accounting function to book that to a non-spendable fund balance at the end of the year. Next slide. And then finally, our next step. So the fiscal year 2021 budget will be reviewed by the School Board Finance Committee when they meet next before the regular board meeting on June 22nd. And then as I mentioned at the beginning, our fiscal 21 budget, all funds will be recommended for school board approval at the next board meeting on June 22nd. So just an item by way of review, as I mentioned at the beginning, there's been so much new and so much unexpected unknown over the last few months. Most of the slides here should be fairly in terms of review and just taking another step towards recommending the budget for approval at the next meeting.
In regards to the building of this budget for next school year, are we basing everything on the notion that we will be in buildings like normal school would happen in September?
Yes, we are. Great question. The budget assumptions for the budget that you see before you assumes a quote unquote normal start to the next year's school year. Any deviation from that, continuing distance learning or a blended learning approach, the financial impacts that would result from that are not included within the budget that you see here. And if we do start the year any other way other than just a normal start, you'll see the financial implications of that reflected in the revised budget for this year.
Thanks.
Bill, I got a quick question on this as well. Do we have any contingency plans? Just, God forbid, COVID comes back with a vengeance in the fall or the winter?
That's a fair question, a good question. And it really depends on the potential financial impacts that would have in our general fund. We know that we have seen some variances on both the expenditure side and the revenue side this year. For example, we've seen savings on substitute teaching budget, a little bit of savings in classroom supplies, and some savings in contracted transportation. We've also seen a loss of fee-based revenue for things like activity fees, obviously food service and community education as well. If we are not able to return, it kind of depends on how the financial impact of that plays out. But that would be included in the revised budget conversation for next year. So the board would have an opportunity to act on that as a part of the revised budget that we would present next year, starting in December and January.
And Bill, if I could just add just a little bit, Paul, I think we do that just as a matter of practice. At least I do. One of the things that you're always doing, and Bill, when it's financial, is you do a lot of what ifs, and especially currently. And so, I've thought of those things. We've looked at, things that you would hope that you would never have to do, and you do that what if, what if this happened, and you play that out, and you do spend time looking at, all different factors that would be involved in that. And I would, and then I would say even, our most recent, contingency midstream plan, you look at we had over $8,000 or $800,000 hit in our fee-based programs, and we did furlough and reduce hours and some employees there, and we did come up with a different compensation plan for our advisors and athletic coaches. But trying to even speculate too, there's a whole other wrinkle here that it's not just, it's not like we're a business and there's an economic cycle. That's not it at all. It's a pandemic, and then so even the governors, if you remember way back to the middle of March, seems like 9 years ago, that first executive order also had some stipulations about, hey, they're going to continue to provide revenue in Fund 1, but not in Funds 2 and 4. And so we're always trying to get a sense for, hey, what might happen. I try to tune into the weekly superintendent call with the Commissioner of Ed. So am I going to say, yep, we've got every contingency handled? No. Absolutely not. But, we have done some of those what ifs. What if you were all distance learning? What if the governor said, hey, you're going to be distance learning September through December? How does that impact how you operate services? But there's also the what if, the state of Minnesota, the governor, the Commissioner of Ed, they also determine our revenue, and that plays a role. So we are continually doing that. And, but for this, we're trying to have that you can't build a budget any other way. Bill's been working on this now for about 6 months, and you're building it on that best case scenario. But certainly we'll keep our ears to the ground, and if we have to make changes, we will.
Thank you.
I think the frustrating piece with this is that, having the need to have a budget approved by June 30th and the state not providing guidance for school districts until toward the end of July, as far as what school will look like in the fall, I think really puts school districts across the state at a disadvantage because you can't plan accordingly with your budgets. Not that it would be a significant impact, but it does have an impact and how districts plan moving forward. And I know, Mike, you've got a team of people that within the district that are working on plans and different options of what this would look like if this scenario happened or that scenario. So, but I think, again, as I said, I think that from a budgeting standpoint, the state has kind of put us at a little bit of an unfair disadvantage because of decisions not being made until after these budgets have to be approved. Are there any further questions on the 2021 budget as presented in the presentation by Bill tonight? Again, this is informational. No action is needed tonight. We will take action and approve the budget for next year at our next board meeting, I believe July 22nd, or June 22nd, sorry. If there are no further questions, then we will move on to our next item on the agenda, which also ties into next year budgeting and beyond. 6.5, which is the financial management discussion around what the future looks like for Shakopee Public Schools. And I will turn this over to Dr. Redmond and Bill Manazzi for presentation.
Thank you. All right, what we're going to attempt to do is kind of, lay the framework for where we're at. Some of these slides are a repeat, and I may go more quickly through those. We shared them on May 18th at the board meeting or at our community conversation at 4:30 today. But looking at the school board decision timeline, and you alluded to the June 22nd meeting and then ultimately the July 20th meeting. I did open up, I clicked on that link just to point out, how we structured things today and what we're looking at then in the coming meetings. And today, Bill's gone through he gave a budget update. Then, we've tried to break financial management into, kind of the current budget update, then next year, 2021, and then future plans. And that's what I'm going to begin. That's what this presentation is about. And we're focusing on these things on the list. And then you'll notice we continue, June 22nd, we've got a CFAC report to the school board. Like Bill just, he's talking about approval for that fiscal 21 budget. And we're going to continue looking at budget adjustment options and multiple plans and recapping those. And then at the board retreat on July 11th, and then, what would appear to be a great opportunity for final decision-making at the July 20th board meeting on the budget adjustments. And so wanted to just share that timeline to hopefully give a better sense of how we're shaping, how we present at the board meetings, and how we're trying to kind of, break the information apart too. We get it. If you're, if you're tuning in to watch a board meeting, you just have Bill do an update for the current year budget. Then he did a preliminary budget for next year's budget. And now I'm going to talk about future plans. And so what I want to focus on is defining the challenge, information work, information shared on the preparation work that has been going on in terms of prepping for a possible budget cut proposal to the board. And then some preliminary work on the, or preliminary questions on referendum options, taking a look at those same three phased-in levy options as a possible form of levy proposal, or again, as a planning starter or jumping off point. And then, I'll end this presentation. This was the one item that was informational that we talked about. There may, the board may request or make a motion for action for the leadership team to present draft budget cut proposals at the next board meeting on June 22nd. So that's where we're headed with this. As in the previous presentation, the community conversation at 4:30, I do think it's always important to begin with the end in mind, or maybe begin with the most important in mind. In our case, it's the grounding, the why. For us, we need to maintain quality programming and learning opportunities for students. We need to continue to attract, retain, and fairly compensate high quality teachers. And we also then need to build a path to long-term financial stability. And I'm not going to go deep into this slide. I've talked about this slide a lot. You'll notice, if you follow the cursor, the last 3 years, we've made some progress in the right direction towards the fund balance goal. We have impending financial challenges starting this coming school year and then in the years that follow. And again, when you define that challenge, the math part of it, it's pretty simple. Our expenses, they have to be equal to or less than revenue. Starting next year, that's not what they look like. There's only 3 ways to fix that kind of a problem. You've got to make budget cuts, you've got to increase revenue, or you've got to do both. I'm not going to spend much time on this slide. Bill's alluded to the $2.5 million impending budget deficit for next year. We've gone to work on that a little bit, and we'll continue to do so. And then, the key information is, if we did not, doing nothing is not an option. If we did nothing, we'd end up, on the path towards statutory operating debt, and we simply can't let that happen. And then further defining the challenge, I know I used this slide earlier as well, but again, I think it's a powerful slide. This is, we're the red bars. This is comparison of revenue and expenses per student. It comes from the auditors. It's not something we created. The dark gray bars are the metro average. The lighter gray bars are the state average. Our revenue that we receive each year is about $1,800 less per student than the metro average, as our expenditures. And I would say we're providing much in the way of value for the money. I've talked about this quite a bit as well. Bill alluded to in his presentation, if state funding, our basic per pupil funding, if it had simply kept pace with inflation since 2003, nothing extravagant, nothing even above and beyond inflation, just kept pace, we would have an additional a little bit more than $5 million in revenue each year. And that would go a long ways towards tackling the impending challenges. And then, we've talked a lot about this too. A lot of other districts, when they've looked to voter approved operating levies to meet those basic expenditures when the state, when the state doesn't keep pace with the rate of inflation. On this graph, we don't have a bar. We currently do not have a voter approved operating levy. The metro average is $1,250 per student. If we translated that into total dollars, and did the what if Shakopee had that metro average voter approved operating levy, that'd be $11.4 million each year. That would take care of that impending budget challenge. So again, just trying to define that challenge in those previous slides. And then as a superintendent and a school leadership team, we've been working on preparation of, possible or proposed budget cuts because that takes time, it takes research. And so we've been looking at both types of budget adjustments. We've been looking at permanent budget cuts. We've been looking at an increase, what type of increase in revenue would help us to hit that that long-term financial stability, and what is balanced, what might be prudent or seen as realistic. And so I know I've shared a lot of that, at 4:30 and then at the May 18th board meeting. So I won't go deeper. I do think, and I know I've shared this idea, I think as a leadership team and as a superintendent and as a school board, I think it would be wise for us to, have to really define what it means when we say path to long-term financial stability, to do that unequivocally, to do that explicitly, and with information that really anybody can understand and hold us accountable. And so after, we take care of this impending financial challenge with budget adjustments, I think it would be wise beginning the 22-23 school year to commit to adding at least $500,000 each year to the unassigned fund balance, and to keep doing that until we get to $10 million, which is right smack in the middle of that unassigned fund balance goal. that was on that previous slide here, and it's also in policy for our district. And as I mentioned, you know, the leadership team has been working hard, knowing there was a very strong possibility that the board would seek, you know, possible or proposed budget cuts. And so trying to frame it and look at the financial picture and looking at the impending challenges, the determination was made that we would need to make, no matter what, this is not pending on any kind of new revenue. Suppose maybe somebody walked in with a $20 million gift to the district, that might change it. But, you know, the things that are viable, the things that we know, it would be my recommendation that no matter what, we make budget cuts in the amount of $2,050,000, and those need to be permanent budget cuts. We've begun working on a proposal of $450,000 for next school year, and then an additional $1.6 million for the 21-22 school year in permanent budget cuts. Very, very important to note, none of this slightly over $2 million would be in the form of classroom teachers. And then, you know, the second part of preparation of proposed budget cuts is taking a look at, you know, there's a possibility of increased revenue through an operating levy, but I think you've got to look at it in, you know, what if there is no levy, or what if there is a levy and the voters don't approve it? And so in that case, it's our, you know, estimation and our analysis and determination that we would need an additional $5.4 million in budget cuts for the 21-22 school year. This includes cuts to classroom teachers. This is in addition to or on top of the no matter what, the little over $2 million in budget cuts I just talked about. And that then would end up being a total of a little under $7.5 million in budget cuts, $450,000, you know, for this coming school year, and another $7 million for the 21-22 school year. And we've also been doing some preliminary work on possible levy options. At the earlier presentation, I talked a lot about, you know, a traditional levy just doesn't seem to be a prudent choice. Just doesn't seem to be right in terms of the economic climate to figure out a per pupil dollar amount and ask for the money all at once. It seems much more prudent to turn to a phased-in levy where you break the levy up. It's voted on one time, I should add, but you break the payment for the levy and the levy revenue up then over typically 3 or 4 years. To me, that's a much more fiscally prudent, conservative, and respectful approach. And, you know, I mentioned earlier, we do have one piece of good financial news. We have some of our construction debt or construction borrowing that's being paid off over the next couple of years. And so when I show phased in levy options, the three that I'll show, they would result in no net tax increase. In other words, we took the total of school district taxes being paid this year and then compared it to, you know, the year after an operating levy would be approved in the form of a phased-in option that I'll show in just a little bit. The total taxes would go down slightly. And then in years 2, 3, and 4 of a phased-in levy, there would be, you know, slight or moderate increases. And I just want to point out, and I know I did this earlier at the 4:30 presentation, but this is meant to just help with planning. It's tough to get I think it's tough to get your head around, you know, what's a phased-in levy? And so these spreadsheets show 3 examples of phased-in levies. This first one would be $1,000 per pupil, phased in over 4 years. You can see the $2 million, a little over $2 million in budget cuts here. You see the levy phased in over 4 years. You see hitting that $500,000 fund balance goal. You know, another, you know, phased in levy option would be $900 per pupil over 3 years, $300 each year. You see the little over $2 million in budget cuts. See another impending, you know, challenge in the 22-23 school year. I think we can tackle that. with some one-time cuts. I think we've been doing some work in preparation on that, so I think we might be able to tackle most of that 900,000. You'll see the $300 per year in new levy revenue coming in each year. You'll see meeting that $500,000 fund balance goal. And then another $900 per pupil phased in levy over 4 years does much the same as the others. This is a brand new slide, and there's much more to come on this. This is preliminary information. Bill Manazzi's done great work with our financial advisors from Baker Tilly. But this is, the question I keep getting asked by individual board members, members of the leadership team, the community. All right, what does a phased-in levy do to taxes? How does it look? And rest assured, I know Bill alluded to this at the 4:30 meeting. There'll be a lot more information to come as we move along. And certainly if we decide to go the route of a levy or, in any form, including a phased-in levy, we would have an online tax calculator where you put in your home address and you get your specific information. But just on this spreadsheet that Bill and his team put together, if you look at phased-in option levy 1, I'm not going to go through the whole spreadsheet, but I'll touch on a couple points. And if you want, Bill and I could back up and answer questions and go deeper in a little bit. But the average price home in our district is a home valued at $280,000. It's not a number we picked. It was a number, calculated by our financial advisors and comes through, home valuation across the entire school district. And if you look at the tax impact on that home for the phased-in levy option 1, which is $1,000 per pupil over 4 years, $400 per pupil in year 1, then $300, $200, $100. In year 1, the owner of this home would actually pay $75 less in taxes. That is the end of that bond debt. That's that bond debt being paid off. In year 2, the taxes would go up by $139, in year 3 by $90, in year 4 by $44. If you take the entire I shouldn't do that on a spreadsheet that's in a Google slide. I was going to highlight this row. But if you add up these 4 numbers, the tax impact each year, the total tax impact over 4 years on the average value home would be an increase of $198 per year. And then, Bill has some numbers here for a $50,000 home, $1 million home, shows the amount of the debt that is being paid off. And then we do the same thing for the 300 option. You'll see, again, taxes go down in year 1, go up some in year by $95 in year 2, then $134. It goes up a total, once it's fully, once the phased-in levy is fully implemented, the total tax impact is $153 per year on that average price home in our district.
Mike, can I jump in?
Sure.
153 and the first option of 198. Isn't that the total amount of tax impact, not per year, but over the course of those 4 years?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Did I may have misspoke.
Yeah, you said per year, and I want to make sure that's.
Oh, thank you. Yep.
Year.
No, much appreciated.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah. Yep.
Real quick, I'm assuming this does not assume any new housing, new businesses moving in. Is this based on current?
Correct. Joe, that's a great question. And Bill, jump in at any time too. But when we do these calculations with our financial advisor, and it's in statute, we have to do them as though everything is static moving forward. And so I think I know what you're getting at. When you look at the new housing going up in our community, it's quite likely the tax bases are calculated on 2-3 years from now might be much greater, and that would lessen the impact of the taxes. So if that's what you're getting at, and if that would kind of be that point of view, this is really the worst case, if you will.
Right.
And
Okay,
I had a question. Oh, go ahead, Paul. I've got a question, but maybe you're thinking the same thing.
Okay, so what about when this levy ends? Are we gonna go back to the voters and ask for the same thing again? When do they actually get to see that full decrease in their taxes?
Paul, typically when a levy is put in, it's for a period of 10 years. So if a levy were voted on November of this year, typically that would then be in place for a period of 10 years. And that's that calculation. And I think you're asking, there's a lot of variables. If the tax base goes up, if there's more commercial, industrial, and things like that, and we could certainly, play that out. There's far more economic factors at work. But in terms of the levy, typically a levy is voted on and then put in place for a period of 10 years.
Oh, Mike, is it fair to say that with these either three options, whether it's payable 2024 or payable 2023, this brings us within a year or two of additional debt dropping off or more buildings being paid for, which would then be an additional possible tax savings for Shakopee?
It could be, yeah. Bill, please correct me, but I believe we pay off, the next time we see debt drop or a debt payoff is fiscal or calendar year 26, I should say.
That's correct, calendar 26. So yes, yep, exactly.
Yep.
So being part of a 10-year levy, I guess I'm looking at it from if it's payable 2026 is where people could potentially see another drop off in taxes as a result of us paying more building debt off.
Yep.
And Bill, is that somewhere in the neighborhood of another 5.5 million in 26? Do you know off the top of your head?
Matt, I want to say the amount is about 3.7.
Okay, thank you for correcting me.
Let me absolutely confirm that.
And Matt, I want to say I'm glad you asked Bill that one directly.
And I have a question as well. Bill, this might be right up your alley. So in the first scenario, the debt drop is the 5.53 million. In the other two scenarios, it's split up over 2 years. I think you get to the same number. What's the timing difference there?
A great question. You are correct. The entire debt drop is assumed in taxes payable 2021 in the first scenario. And in the second and third scenario, it's split over 2 years, albeit the majority in payable 21 and a smaller amount in pay 22, 800 and some thousand in pay 22. We were able to structure it that way related to the property tax relief, related to the net tax impact decrease in pay 21. So you can see a home valued at 50,000 in payable 2021 under options 2 and 3, that net tax impact in pay 21 is zero. And we wanted to structure that so that nobody would have a tax increase under options 2 and 3. And the debt drop that allowed us to do that is shown there in pay 21. So that's the reason for the majority of it in pay 21 and the residual amount held over to pay 22.
That makes sense. So it's within our, the district's influence to time that based on what seems most economical.
Exactly right. Yep. To give just a little bit more detail, the way the 2015 bond for the high school renovations additions was structured, it was structured initially to account for some of the debt relief coming in pay 21. So the district does have authority to structure that debt as is most economically advantageous for projects or other tiers that they think are coming up in the future.
Thank you.
Are there other questions at this point in the presentation questions, comments before Mike moves on to the next? All right, seeing none.
And I can go back too, and would certainly be happy to. And this would be the part of for a possible board request, and and I'll read this slide. In acknowledgement of the immediate, and by immediate, I'm talking next year and the years that follow, budget challenges, district leadership has been working on preparing a little bit over 2 million in proposed budget cuts. And then also, related, in acknowledgement of the projection of future budget challenges and the need to increase revenue or make cuts to meet these challenges, district leadership has also been working on preparing an additional 5.4 million in proposed budget cuts. And so should the board want to direct, district leadership will be prepared to share both of these proposed budget cuts at the June 22nd school board meeting. And then if it was the desire of the board, a motion for directing such action may be appropriate at this time. And again, happy to attempt to answer any other questions.
Are there any additional questions for Mike or Bill at this time in regards to the future financial needs of the district? And this is great information. I think I learn something new every time that I see it. Makes me think a little bit more every time that I hear it. So great work in putting all this together. I know that this is not an easy task with everything else that's going on in the world. This is not an easy topic for any one of us on the board. But we know that doing nothing is not an option.
Yeah, Christy, thank you for saying it that way. I mean, anytime we're talking about cutting costs, as I've heard both Mike and Bill say, 80% of our expenditure is people's jobs, right? And when we're talking about the $2 million or the potential 5.4, that's people. That's good people, right? It's you can always get a slice of it of buying fewer supplies or getting lucky with utility bills or something like that. But you're talking about people, so having cuts is a very hard thing to have, but it is fiscally prudent. So, Mike, you said you're looking for a formal motion on what's on what's on the screen right now.
Yep, if that's the board's desire, and then the leadership team would present proposed budget cuts at the June 22nd meeting.
Yeah, I guess I'll make that motion with the comment that I applaud the public nature of this. Typically, when people's jobs when people are being notified that their positions are being eliminated, or they don't have much of a runway, a lot of times those are kept very quiet and not done in a publicly disclosive way. So I would say that why I'm making this motion is I believe it's important that we have those conversations in a public setting for full transparency, even though it's an incredibly unpleasant topic.
Okay, I'll second that with the comment that maybe if we look at this, it'll maybe shed some daylight on what each option is going to look like. Because right now at this time, with people losing their jobs and being out of work for several months, not everyone qualifies for unemployment compensation. But I think right now I'm really struggling with asking people to give us more money and keep my conscience clear. The rest of you may disagree with me, you may not, but that's just my take on it.
So we have a motion by Matt and a second by Paul. Is there any further discussion before we vote? I think one of the comments that I'd like to make in regards to this is anytime that we make a cut, whether it's $50,000, $450,000, $2 million, $5 million, it's going to impact our students. even from a, if you're cutting supplies, that's going to cause a student to maybe not have an opportunity to do something. Just any little cut that we make, in the end, it does trickle back to the classroom. I'm very conscious of that. And I would be fully supportive of this motion to bring the cuts that are being proposed to the board at the next board meeting for consideration and to take action. Is there any further comment? Seeing none, then I will ask Sarah for a roll call vote, please. Aldrich?
Yes.
Wolfie?
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
McMahon,
Yes.
Tomzik,
Yes.
Tucker,
Yes.
and Peterson.
Yes. Motion carries unanimously. Thanks again for the presentation, Mike and Bill. Again, this is not light lifting in any way. This is a very difficult decision that we have to make going forward. And I appreciate all the time and effort that you've put into gathering information for the board to review. All right, moving on to, I believe, our last item on our agenda tonight, which is item 6.6, the high school student walking distances. I know this is a topic that we discussed at our board retreat in January, and Mike and Bill have a presentation to provide us with the information that they've researched.
So I'm going to share my screen again, and I'm going to share, it's actually in two different, very, very brief Google slide presentations. But this is meant to be an information, an informational presentation to foster a discussion. And so the first is just, the first part of this just really kind of what is. Currently, these are our walking distances in the district, and I'm really we're focusing on the high school at this point. Our high school students in grade 9, if they live a mile or more from the high school, they're eligible for, to ride a bus. High school students in grades 10 to 12, that just jumps to 2 miles or more from the high school before they're eligible for that bus ride. And this is a topic that seems to come up, kind of repeatedly. And I think it's one that it's important that for the board to just begin to wrap their heads around and discuss. And we're trying to give the information, kind of some of the facts on the front end. We're certainly happy to do more research, but kind of a brief analysis. There are a few other districts that are similar to us that have walking distances of 2 miles. For high school students. It is more common to find other districts similar to us with walking distances shorter than 2 miles for high school students. We've done some cost analysis just recently, with our bus company, and Bill Manazzi and folks from the bus company worked on this. And these are hypothetical. We laid out for them, and we could certainly add nuance to it, but one of them is they're working on planning bus routes for next year. We thought that was an opportune window to say, hey, what if we did a 1.25 mile option? In other words, students in grades 9 to 12, if they live beyond a mile and a quarter, they would be eligible to ride the bus. And when we calculated that out, the number of students in that and bus ridership and all those things, the estimated cost would be a little over $118,000 annually. And that would be the equivalent of 2 additional routes. We also asked them to look at a 1.5 mile option. Students in grades 9 to 12, if they live beyond a 1.5 miles from the high school, that cost was half of the other one. A little bit over $59,000. One additional bus route would handle that need. And a lot of times people go, charge a fee for service. And we looked at this, And we made some assumptions in our analysis. One would be that if students qualified for free or reduced lunch, they would ride for significantly reduced rates or for free. So in other words, not going to generate a lot of revenue. Bus capacity is 78. Kind of looking at ridership and doing an analysis of that, we thought, all right, you'd have to have 40 riders, paying the yearly fee. That amounts to about $1,500 per student. That really just doesn't, plus we don't really have a system that's set up to do that. It's not something we typically do. Doesn't, not ruling it out, just doesn't appear to be a real viable option at this time. We're certainly willing to do further research. I do want to jump into one other, and I'll give, Dave Orlowski did the work on this because the question was asked over the weekend, I think to help kind of grasp, hey, what is, all right, I know we're talking distances and I know what 2 miles is and I know what 1.5 miles and 1.25 miles is, but when you see it on a map, that has a different impact. And so Dave was kind enough to put together an approximation is what we'll call this, because we're just using a radius as the crow flies. But when we calculate whether a student qualifies for bus ridership or not, we actually use actual driving distance. And so Dave used, 0.9 miles for 1.0 and 1.15. And that's what we typically do. And also based it on our current year students. Just the idea of this is just mainly to give board members and others who might be watching this meeting a sense for, hey, what is 2 miles from the high school? Where does that go? And that's what this picture shows. And then, how many students are, does that capture? And I believe the next one's it's a little more blown up. You can see some of the streets there, in terms of here's Marshall. Obviously, here's 169, but you get a sense the hospital's there. Where is that 2 mile radius? Currently. And then looked at 1.5 miles from the high school. And you'll see, obviously a little closer to Marshall and the hospital, cuts off part of, it would be students in there would be expected to walk. Again, it's an approximation. And then looking, and I'll go right to the big loop for 1.25 miles. Tightening that up, you can see that the boundary here is almost on Marshall Road, and what that looks like. So I'm hoping that's helpful. I did also send that, by email today to each of the board members. But just wanted to really share this information as a discussion starter. I'm happy to present any part of that, or even I know Dave would be happy to explain more about some of the distances and that approximation. But and I believe we've got that, both those presentations are attached to the board agenda packet as well now.
Hey, Mike, just real quick, a question. The numbers in the chart, and maybe this is for Dave directly. The numbers in the chart, is that the number of students who are walking? So when you do the 2 mile radius, it's 1,239. That means that we'd have 1,200 students out of our 2,700 at the high school would be walkers.
Right, they'd be inside the 2 miles. That's what that would be.
Thank you. Just want to make sure.
It was 1.9, so that was an estimate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and here's what Matt's referring to. So on the 2 miles, you've got a total of 1,239 students. And then if we go to the 1.5 miles, you've got 678. And then 1.25 miles, it's 539. So,
and I guess in my mind, so we're at 1 mile for 9th grade.
Yep.
So that kind of doesn't apply with the 2 mile radius. And what I've heard colloquially, what I recall from way back in my old high school days was that it's really those early sophomores, right, who don't have their licenses yet. We've got plenty of cars in the parking lot, right? So we find that there's plenty of students driving and carpooling, frequently used, right? So that's just my it's an observation. We've had this discussion several times. I'm glad we're bringing it back with data. And I think it's something we should discuss further.
And I know,
Matt, you make a really good point. I'm all for what's going to be safest for these students, not only with getting hit by a car, but not everyone driving out there is the nicest person in the world and may harm a student. And, we had some of these really cold days. I can't believe that somebody's not winding up with frostbite if they're walking 2 miles. And that's also, my big consideration right there.
for me, there's an equity consideration too, because when they start to get their licenses, some families have the opportunity to provide a vehicle for students and some do not. So for me, that's a big concern too.
Well, and I was just thinking out loud, if there's an opportunity along those lines of equity, and I'm thinking back to Mankato State University, where you had to buy a parking pass just for the privilege to still walk about a mile to campus. But is there any thought around maybe a fee-based parking pass for students that would otherwise offset any transportation costs to reduce that radius to the 1.5 miles, for example?
Well, I believe we already have the fee-based parking passes.
There is a fee-based system in place today?
Yeah.
There is, yeah. And the rates were increased, due to budgetary pressure not too long ago, a year or two ago.
So I think one of the things in the presentation that I noted that 9th grade is currently 1 mile. With the proposal of what Mike showed with the change to 1.5 or 1.25 would be 9th grade would be included in that change. So they would actually be going from 1 mile to either 1.25 or 1.5. The 1 mile for them would not be available anymore. So it would all be the same for the high school across all grades.
Yeah, Christy, thank you for mentioning that. I've got that on my notepad and just wanted to, make sure we knew that. Most schools do the same walking distance, bus riding distance across all the grades of a high school. And obviously the bus company, when they were doing the calculations, yeah, they get ridership tends to decline, juniors and seniors, but it doesn't go to zero. I mean, I remember a call this past fall from a parent of a senior going, we're like at 1.97 miles away. And you just go, I'm sorry, but if we drew a line, we've got to stick to it. Because if you go to 1.97, then you're going to go to 1.94, and now you might as well have not had that. But felt horrible to have that conversation because that's a significant walk. Yeah.
To Matt's point, so do we know how many students, 9th graders in particular, if you went from the mile to the 1.25 miles and 1.5 miles scenarios, how many students are impacted by that decision because ultimately their radius gets bigger?
Yep. Tim, that's a little hard to quantify. Dave did the 1920 numbers, and it'll be right now they're not there yet. So we could certainly do that. And that's why I said we're happy to do more research. We just kind of wanted to give, this was kind of a jump into a discussion, and depending on where that goes, we're happy to do that research. And that is a challenge. I mean, I would argue that adds a unique, challenging dimension to this situation. Is when I say most schools, they have the same distance across all 4 grades. Yeah, you're making one of the grades longer to make 3 of the grades shorter. Again, not that we would have to do that. That's just pretty typical. But even doing that, you're talking about, 59,000 at the 1.5 miles, and you're talking about 118,000 at a 1.25 miles. That's a significant amount of money. annually as well. So that's, we're trying to, the goal, I don't think, is to come out with a decision or anything, but more of a, I think we've been, I've been a little bit probably remiss in even bringing this for discussion. And I know we've had it and we've talked about it, and just feel this is one of those issues that we, need to go a little bit deeper on. So.
Well, and Mike, to the point of, that's a lot of money. I mean, basically take that 2.056, million that we have to cut and add whatever we spend in busing. We need to have an offset, and
just stole my question.
That's yet another person or two people or three people who suddenly are out of a job. And I'm not saying that that's, a reason not to do it. I'm saying that's the calculus, right? I mean, Paul's point about student safety is fantastically important, right? But how do we balance that between, if we spend on this to help students be safer and more comfortable, more convenient, to Christy's point of every cut that we make takes something away from the classroom. Or if we take 2 staff members out of our district, what's the impact there? And unfortunately, it is neither or. It's not. We don't have the ability to. Well, unless Bill found somebody with that $20 million donation to the district, it is what it is, right? I mean.
Okay, Chrissy, don't mean to put you on the hot seat here, but I believe you live just kind of right within that border. How long does it take your kids to walk to school?
My son was a 9th grader last year, so he got to ride the bus. But from our estimation, it would take somewhere between 35 and 40 minutes, according to Google Maps.
So if there's a 20, 25 below wind chill, who else wants to go out and spend that time outside? Not every day is going to be 95 degrees out.
I think that we're in a situation where it's very unfortunate that this was not discussed when the school was built where it was. Because the high school where it's built now was at that time really out in a rural area. And having a 2-mile walking radius in a rural area seems a little long. It may have worked for the high school where it was before the high school was built out on the south part of town, on the south side of 169. But I would argue that today, the 2-mile radius doesn't work for us. We've grown so much. We're not the same city we were when that school was built.
I'm a big fan of the 125 just because that basically is Marshall Road, and to have kids try to cross from Marshall is it's dangerous because those cars are whipping by there, and there's always traffic on Marshall, and it takes longer to get there because I think the 125 was basically at Marshall. Dave, is that right? Or Mike, You're on mute.
I was just going to pull the slides up again, so I'll tell you that.
Yeah, 125 ends at Marshall.
Okay.
It was, yeah. I was trying to grab the slides, but go ahead, Dave, if you want.
That's okay. If they got it, it's good. Yeah. If it's right at Marshall. Yeah.
It's just bad writing, as Matt said, it's with where we're at with the budget and everything. If you add 2 routes and that's $120,000, that's a person or 2 employees, and it's not good timing.
Yep. And the one thought I'm having would be even, not that we want to revisit this issue, but you made the request for proposed budget cuts to maybe to see that. We have been looking at some one-time cost savings, so maybe to get a sense of that and, kind of a comprehensive nature. I don't know, maybe that helps inform some of the financial thinking, maybe it doesn't. But that's coming on June 22nd, and we'll have that. But certainly, if it was easy, I'd have come with a recommendation, but this is one And not knowing the history of it makes it even more challenging for me. And
Yeah, no, Mike, and the history, at least in the reason why there's a differential for 9th versus 10 through 12 is simply, we recently moved 9th grade to the high school, right? And we didn't want to start saying, hey, immediately go to the 2 miles in 9th grade, because that is the class that uses buses the most. So that's why, you know, we made that decision to carry on the 1 mile, but it does stick out as an anomaly. And if I'm a parent and I've got a sophomore and a freshman in the same house, and I'm going, hey, the freshman gets to ride the bus, but the sophomore's, you know, putting on 8 layers of scarves to be able to walk in that 20-degree below. It's, you know, it does feel like, you know, a very big disparity. And then, as Judy pointed out, the equity concerns are just monumental.
Reminds me of Moorhead State. It wasn't fun.
So just to be clear, you're just talking about the walking around campus, right? Not that Moorhead State overall wasn't fun.
Sure, let's go with that.
So Mike, if we get the cuts at our next meeting, the proposed cuts for the board to review and take possible action on that, when do we, if we wanted to table this until after that meeting, is there a drop dead date that we have to have a decision made to change this for upcoming school year?
I'm going to look to Dave on that. You know, I know that, you know, I'm not even sure when they get the, you know, the specific students rolling forward in enrollment. Dave, any sense of that?
I'd say mid-July, somewhere in there. I think we could check with Jerry as well. I don't know, Bill, maybe you know too. Yeah, I would say mid to late July they start printing off what those routes and such are going to be. There's a lot of unknowns right now as well because of how enrollments might be working given the world we're in, the no contact world. And so I think we'll be pushing up against all those old deadlines. But we'll get the date.
Okay. I mean, does that seem reasonable to somewhat table this information? Obviously, there was no action anyway tonight, but to bring this information back once we have a better idea of what's being proposed and if it seems like it's even viable to do something for next year?
I think that's a very good idea.
I think it could probably be discussed as a retreat as isn't the board meeting in July the 20th or so? I would think that would be enough time, Dave. If we actually,
I'm reaching out to Jerry right now, so as soon as he lets me know, I'll know probably tomorrow.
And we can help with, yeah, we'll work on a timeline. Is there any other information, anything else, you know, and again, this wasn't meant to be, you know, comprehensive, it was meant to be a discussion starter, but any other questions that you think of right now, or, you know, certainly reach out to Dave, Bill, or I, you know, at any point in the days to come too.
Just one more, like a hybrid scenario. If you went with 9th grade at 1.25 miles and the other 3 grades at the 1.5 miles, what's the tipping point between the 59,000 and the 118? Like, is there some way to kind of architect it where you get the biggest bang for your buck in terms of providing that transportation service and keeping equity in light of that as well?
Yeah, and we can ask that. Again, it's going to be a little bit challenging. They're working on last year's numbers, so that tipping point could move 10 students in either direction. It looks, just looking at the data Dave put together with the, you know, the rough approximations, those numbers don't move as much between 1.5 and 1.25 as they did, you know, and I know it's half the distance, but so somewhere there's a spot between that 1.25 and 1.5. And we can look at it, certainly. But it, they put a lot of time. It's not as simple as, it's not as simple as one might think. Hey, you put them all in and click a few buttons. It's, they're really looking at how they organize routes, and it's not, every street doesn't go the same speed, doesn't go the same directions. So, even the length of routes in a certain area and the times it takes to do the pickups, and depending on where you're coming from, influence that. But we could certainly look at that. My worry would be, again, you might have that 9th grader and 10th grader, one's riding the bus, one isn't, and
Mike, I hate to bring up a new idea here, and it's not new, but we've discussed it. So I don't want to take credit for it, but what about a November to March only? Something like that as a different way. Is there any appetite for something like that?
I'd be very interested in seeing a cost on that.
Right, I think we'd need to see the data to see if it's the way we want to go, but it's an interesting thought.
Right.
Right.
All right, so it sounds like we've got some direction then as far as what we're going to do with this topic, and more to come.
Yep, thank you, and that helps. And again, if you think of something, tomorrow afternoon or whatever, holler. We're happy to, try to get that type of calculation, and we'll do the best we can.
Thanks, Dave and Mike, for putting all that together. Item 7 is other. I don't think that there are any other topics under other. Mike, did you have anything?
I do not.
Okay. So then we will move on to item number 8, which is committee reports. And we will start with Joe. You're on the top of my screen, so.
No committee, but last week, it was actually a week and a half ago, Christy and I had the coffee chat at 7:30 in the morning. We had a couple of people on, and we had a great conversation with the one person that we talked for about 40 minutes about financial information. It went great. Christy can talk a little bit more about it, but we had, it was just a good debate, and, getting information out. We have another one coming up on the 23rd at 6:30 to 7:30. Hopefully we can have a few more people than just the one in on the conversation, but looking forward to that one as well. Christy and I will be doing that one also.
All right. Matt, do you have anything?
No committee reports. The committee that I chair is meeting this next week, the personnel committee meeting. And just wanted to give kudos. I think I've seen some press, and I think Dave and Mike may have been present, but just a student organized and student run protest or activism that I thought was very impressed. And I'm very impressed also that just there was behavior. It sounded like there were no incidents or anything. So, many of those students were our students, and I think they did us proud by peacefully sharing their voices.
All right, Judy, do you have anything tonight?
I do not.
Okay. Paul?
No, I do not have anything, but I was going to voice what Matt said about the protest. They there was a little civil disobedience, which is okay, but there was no destructive behavior, and that's something I think we can hang our hat on.
And Angela, do you have any committee updates?
I do not have any committee updates, but I do want to say thank you to all the teachers and staff and families who have endured such a crazy year. And one thing I just wanted to point out is how fun it was to see how they ended the year. We had a reverse parade at Sunpath. It got canceled. my son's teacher made an opportunity to go meet her somewhere in the community. And so we got to do that. And then there was another rescheduled parade. While we weren't able to make it, I've seen lots of pictures and videos of parades around Shakopee. So again, just want to thank everybody for this really crazy year we've had to go through.
Thanks for bringing that up, Angela. Let's see here. Tim.
Well, there was to be a policy meeting today, but there was some big community financial update that stole the thunder. So, Mike, I'll reach out to you separately and we can reschedule that as needed. I did have the opportunity, in fact, the Shakopee Diversity Alliance had another board meeting. They meet the last Thursday of the month. But I also had the opportunity to participate on Friday. They did a diaper drop and had a charity downtown in Minneapolis that was earmarked to receive those items, cases of water. The community turnout was really favorable and just a great response. So good to be part of that.
Great. Angelica, is there anything city-wise that you'd like to bring forward to the board tonight? I know she's here. Okay, we will, this is what makes it really hard, trying to see who's here and who's not. Bob Greeley, do you have anything?
Sure, you know I'm going to have a few things to say probably. So our drivers in behind the wheel, teachers hit the road with their students again today. First time since March 16th, had a good day with that. We're currently planning for 2021, what driver's ed is going to look like, both classroom. We're doing everything online right now. See how that goes this summer, but right now it's online planning and no for behind the wheel next year. Our advisor council meets again on June 23rd. We'll do that Google Plan Meet. We'll do that the Google meeting. Our summer looks like right now, everything is going to be 1-to-9 ratio with guidance. So we're planning moving forward with that. Sessions G and H, driver's ed, start classroom online on June 15th. So we notified all the parents and families last week. And this week they're picking up their required manuals at the DO. So we're making provisions for them to pick that up in the vestibule and they start online next week. And let's see what else I got. School age childcare started today for the summer of the Y at Red Oak and Jackson. And as far as I know, everything went well, those buildings. I didn't have any email communications that it didn't go well. The information I have that both sites have over 100 students attending. That's the information that I have. So moving ahead, we'll be, for the summer, everything is, under the current guidance, 1-to-9 ratio in all our adult enrichment and youth enrichment classes. And just following up on what Bill said earlier in his presentation on finances, and Mike touched on it too, we have a $3 million budget and half of that is fees that we collect across the board. And so I know it's not the same as an overall Fund 1 budget, but it's a huge impact for us. We're doing our best we can to bring in fees and provide great customer service to our school district residents. So I think that's about all I have.
All right, thanks, Bob. Angelica, were you able to unmute?
Yes, I'm here. So sorry about that. But I don't have any reports for tonight. Thank you.
All right, thanks for being here with us. Bill?
Madam Chair, the only thing, just confirmation of the conversation earlier regarding the debt drop. We talked about from pay 25 to pay 26. So that is correct. Calendar 26 is the debt drop. And the amount was correct. We talked about 3.7 million as the amount, and that was confirmed. So just confirmation of a couple items from earlier.
Thanks for that. Sarah?
No, I don't have anything else. Thank you.
Okay. Dave?
I know, so sorry, SunPass parade got canceled. I got to go to a couple of three reverse parades actually. Teachers did a great job. Parents did it was very fun, kind of a nice culmination to a weird year. And then Bob alluded to this, but there was for the first time some activity at our high school today with youth sports of swimming, volleyball, and basketball today. And the word is that everything is going smoothly and people are following the rules, which that's good for day one. So we want to hope everybody keeps doing that and we keep people safe. So that's it.
All right. Thanks, Dave. We had a community engagement meeting, and again, we just established the future dates for the coffee chats and discussed a little bit about how it went the first time, and felt that it was successful, even though we only had a couple of people. But I think now that we're having more conversation and we're engaging with the community as far as the financial information, there might be more interest and more engagement as we have more of these. So that's all I had for a report. Mike, do you have anything?
Yeah, I just, and part of it was spurred, Sarah put the meeting schedule up again, and you know, I know I emailed the board. I forwarded the Commissioner of Ed email. I think it came in at 3:04 on Friday in response to the governor had turned the dials up again. And so we're beginning to work through all that information. We're really waiting for MDE to go, what school specific things do we need to be aware of? Can we, where could we maybe change some of the things that we're planning in terms of activities and that stuff? So we're continuing to work on that. But I notice on the meeting schedule, I think there's a possibility to begin to, bless you, there's a possibility to perhaps do with social distancing in some of those meetings, more in person. And even I notice, so some of the committee meetings, not this week, but the following week, I could see perhaps we might examine maybe one of those or two of those maybe becomes in person if they tend to be smaller, and we could do that, and we're allowed to do that. And then I know that the School Board Association continues to send guidance out. I notice June 22nd, it says our board meetings in the boardroom. I think that's unlikely, but I think there's a chance that we want to explore that thrust stage again, like we did for the one meeting, way back in the end of March. So we'll continue to look at that stuff, and I'll certainly continue to communicate and connect with Christy too as board chair on that. But the one piece when we do those things, and we're really working hard with our staff as well, is if somebody is in any way not comfortable doing that, that's fine. It's okay to connect visually and online. And so we're really trying to, we know sometimes that piece gets lost in the guidance. And we've tried to make that front and center, that we don't want to put anybody in a situation where they're putting their health at risk to do something like that. So we'll continue to study those. It's been a fascinating journey with those rules and how they pertain to education. And we've got a good team working on that, and we'll continue to do so.
All right. With that, is there anything else in regards to our upcoming meetings or important dates that need to be mentioned?
Yeah, Christy, can you please forward me the schedule for the coffee chats?
Yep.
Can't seem to find that right now, and I don't want to miss mine.
We can do that. Seeing no other discussion, then I would ask for a motion to adjourn our meeting for June 8th.
Motion made.
All right, I have Paul make motion, Judy second.
Okay.
Anything else? Sarah, could you please call roll?
Aldred,
Yes.
Brophy,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
McKeon,
Yes.
Tomzik,
Yes.
Tucker,
Yes.
and Peterson.
Yes. Meeting is adjourned. Thanks for your participation tonight. And have
Bye,
a
everyone.
happy week.
Good to see you.
Bye.
Bye.
Hopefully next time in person.